feel about the classic versus progressive control styles?
Ooh, actually, that's a good point. Yeah, because they did this before Street Fighter 6 was even announced, and
Yeah.
I actually think it does it better than currently Street Fighter does their, classic, modern, and
Modern.
dynamic. Dynamic is kind of interesting. I guess it's nice for, people like children that don't know how to play. They can just
Yeah,
mash
just
and
want
then
to
stuff
hit
will happen,
buttons.
right?
Yeah.
Totally fine, right? Um, yeah, I think the great thing I like about it is that it honestly plays exactly the same. Like, there's no limitations put on it. It's honestly just a preference thing. Like, there are benefits to both. It's really progressive is really good for actually. Well, just to explain how it works. So there's classic inputs, which is how all the other fighting games work. You have motion inputs, stuff like that. Progressive, what they do is they change it so that all special moves and supers, they're just directional inputs after being in neutral. So you can do a DP instead of doing a DP motion, like, forward, down, forward, punch. You can instead just do neutral and then do down, forward, and then punch at the same time. And then you'll get a DP, which is really cool. And then supers usually are just like two directions back and forth, and then you press a button. So like, a super, for example, could be just back forward punch or forward back punch, stuff like that. Darune's super, his like command grab, his 720 is just up down punch. So you get that pretty quickly, which is cool.
Hmm.
So you can
A little
imagine
bit
doing like
faster.
yeah. So you can imagine you can do like a teleport, and then within the teleport you do up down, and then when you appear you 720 super. So really dangerous, really scary.
Yeah.
Their whole career. All right.
Yeah, but the difference between the two, in terms of benefits and cons, is that classic obviously cancels are going to be a bit more difficult to be super super fast. So if there's certain combos you're trying to do that maybe have a small window to cancel into, um, progressive is going to be faster at canceling because the inputs are shorter, obviously. The difference is where it's not as useful is if you like to buffer normals in neutral, especially like heavy buttons into supers is quite a common tactic to like stop dashes or to buffer after like an anti or something. It's a little more difficult because you have to go back to neutral and then do the input. So if you don't have the timing down right, it can be more difficult than if you're just buffering it constantly. So classic has the edge in that aspect, and also in the game, a common way people do juggles is something called a dash jab juggle. So basically, you press jab once you hit the juggle, and you cancel it into a dash, and then you press jab again, and you cancel it into a dash. So if you do it in a way that's tricky, like if you're too close, you in progressive you might accidentally get a special move, and then the juggle will drop, or
Oh
you only get
yeah.
like a partial hit, right? So
Mm.
there's good and bad things. You can obviously do both things well, just you have to practice and whatever's more comfortable for you. And the cool thing about progressive, it's really useful on pad and also on hitbox as well, because it's just directional inputs, right? You don't have to do motions, so it's a bit better on your fingers that way. So yeah, I wish for Street Fighter they would have done something like that, but I really wasn't a big fan of them, making it you do less damage, you don't get half your normals, right? Stuff like that. I found it to be really odd. So I
Yeah.
think they could have just copied Progressive, honestly.
That
That's fair.
it does sound like a better way to do things. Honestly, it really does.
Mm, yeah.
A lot of people struggle with those inputs and they see them as like a fake barrier to skill level.
Hmm.
Um,
I
Yeah.
mean, in some ways they are.
yeah,
So, you know,
Yeah. The
yeah,
way
but
I
lets
wouldn't
more
be
people play the
surprised if
game, but like
three
it's so tough.
gets rid of classic.
Maybe.
my DP
I
motions
I hope
though.
not. I just love the choice. I think the best thing that modern fighting games can do is just give players choices. Like let people
Yeah,
do
that's cool.
inputs how they want to do it. Obviously without cheating. Like having multiple inputs at the same time. But yeah, I think it's totally fine because there's stuff with like accessibility that usually Japan developers are pretty bad at. So
Yeah.
it would be nice to get them on level with most North American developers, especially like Mortal Kombat. Killer Instinct even had great accessibility options, which was nice.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well,
I was
I
just
think
really surprised there was no like limitations really for the progressive versus the classic.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can just do this super difficult input really easy and get full damage for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't
Yeah.
know why I
Because
would play classic.
well, because in our community, I play only classic because I play other fighting games as well, and I find it just helps. Like I can already do everything. I'm not like limited. But some people switch to progressive based on the character. Like some people play Darun only in progressive, for example. There's people in Japan who only play progressive, right? So like there's all skill levels, all ranges. It's just a preference at the end of the day.
It's yeah, I 100% agree. That's really awesome. I'm trying to think
Mhm.
here if there's anything else that
I see someone in chat, Arneezy, talking about how they use progressive with Terry because the pretzel motions during a juggle can be a nightmare.
There you go.
I
I
can see that. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was using is it Kyrie? Is that his name?
Mhm.
The main character
Yep.
or the yeah.
Yep.
I was one of his moves.
White hair, ponytail. Yeah.
Yeah, one of his moves was with classic was DP into double half circle back during the trial, and I was
Yes.
like,
Oh wow.
uh...
My
not that it's
fingers.
horrible, not that it's horrible, but it's like you have to do it incredibly fast and smooth and have like great inputs. But I don't
There
have
doesn't
that.
seem to be any shortcuts in Vexel, is there? Like,
Yeah, so in the game it's kind of more like older Street Fighter titles in that there's no, so you can't, you know how in Street Fighter 4 you can do down forward punch and you'll get a DP. There's
Hmm.
none of that in this game. So you have to do an actual DP or like as close as possible and then you'll get it.
oh, like half
But
circle back up.
yeah, exactly. But the thing about Pexel though, they do store inputs pretty well. So I found with Terry on Classic, when I do his juggles, if you do, because usually what you do for the power guys are after the burn knuckle, um, once you do the burn knuckle, you immediately are going into core circle forward and you're pressing punch, and that'll give you geyser right away. So you don't have to do double half circle back to get the motion,
Oh,
which is kind of cool.
okay.
So it's kind of like that in KOF as well. Actually, there's a period of time, I think 2 years ago or so. Arneezy probably remembers better, but Juicebox came into our community for a while, and this was in between Street Fighter 5 and Street Fighter 6, and he was just waiting for KOF 15, and he got into Fexel and he did a lot of lab work for us, like analyzing like the jumps, how the trip guarding works, all that sort of stuff, and he found that there's so many similarities to KOF that are almost like copy pasted. So yeah, if anyone's watching this and they play KOF right now, I think Vexel is a great game to try because there's a lot of similarities and a lot of overlap. The speed is kind of the same
Yeah.
as well, the
Hmm.
competitive speed of it, because it is a very fast game, but it's a lot of conditioning, a lot of baiting, and yeah, it's high speed, but you don't have to worry about making like a lot of mistakes unless like your opponent's like amazing or playing Terry. But
Or
It, it,
playing Terry.
it honestly, it honestly, now that you bring it up, yeah, it does feel like quite a bit like KOF in a lot of ways, especially with
Mhm.
the rush down, the running, like the you can use a lot of like light kicks in your kind of your setup. I think a lot of the what I was watching some higher level play, like I've seen a lot of like light kick to medium kick as like a frame trap.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
that and sort of like, oh, did he press a button? No. Okay, I get the pushback. I get pushed back, enough to kind of be safe. There's a
Mhm.
lot of like non-committal stuff that I saw people doing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it honestly, yeah, it makes perfect sense why they decided to import Terry into the game then, because it's just like he kind of matches the kind of the the atmosphere of the game. Except
Yeah, for sure.
he seemingly does less damage in this version of Fexel, but because I think his KO 15 counterpart does a lot of like he can one touch you. But then again, hey,
Yep.
look, I haven't seen enough Fexel to be like, oh yeah, Terry can one touch you. It looks like you have to work a lot harder to one touch somebody.